Good morning and welcome to the first WealthTech Talks from the Wealth Mosaic in 2021. We hope you're all well, had a restful Christmas and New Year, and despite the challenging backdrop, have commenced the working year with some level of positivity. So my name is Stephen Wall. For those who don't know me, I'm Head of Marketplace and Content, one of the co-founders of the Wealth Mosaic. Today we're going to be talking about financial planning and particularly talking about the sector and its development in the UK market and about the enhancements that technology can bring to the space. So I'm joined today by three expert panelists, all active in one way, shape or form in the UK wealth management sector. James Howell, Director at PwC Consulting, Jamie Keane, Country Manager UK and Ireland at aixigo, and Ian Pickford, Partner, Head of Financial Planning and Wealth Management at Mazars. I'll shortly hand over to each of them to introduce themselves. We've got 60 minutes today, so we've got a full hour to talk through the topic. We're going to be looking at the market status, drivers, challenges, opportunities, and the role of technology, and some elements of looking into the future and where the marketplace is going. There is an opportunity for a Q&A at the end, so if anyone has questions, please type them into the system and we will do our best to answer them at the end. I'll moderate, but we'll seek to get the panelists' opinion on each area that we run through today. And on that note, I think if I hand over, we'll go round clockwise. So Ian, if I could just quickly ask you to introduce yourself first, briefly.
Yeah, hi, my name's Ian Pickford. I head up financial planning and wealth management at Mazars. I've been a partner of the firm for over 15 years. We are a fast-growing, market-leading IFA wealth manager in the UK.
Fantastic, thank you. And James?
Hi, good morning, everyone. James Howell, look after Wealth Management Consulting at PwC UK. Our work is really front-to-back transformation with global wealth managers, but also UK-specific wealth managers. And that includes everything from strategy through to implementation.
Thank you, James. And Jamie, to you finally.
I'm Jamie Keane, Country Manager for UK and Ireland at aixigo, and we provide digital services for wealth managers really across the end-to-end advice process, including risk profiling, portfolio construction, monitoring, reporting, risk management, and as luck would have it, financial planning.
Fantastic, thank you to you all. So I think we've got a nice panel here, some good perspectives from the practitioner, from the consultant, and from the technology side. They'll all contribute to each area, as I mentioned. If we first start off looking at drivers, at status, where is financial planning in the UK wealth management industry? I think, Ian, if we come to you first, what is the sort of background to financial planning in among UK wealth managers? Where would you say the proposition is in terms of its delivery by wealth managers? Can you maybe give us a bit of background?
I think one of the biggest challenges in this sector is the fact the diversity of the providers, and you're dealing with large multinational organisations down to one-man bands, and it's a really diverse mix of providers, all having different requirements and all having different depths of pocket is probably the best way to describe it. And I think my I'll go. You guys look too young to remember this, but I go back to Woolworths and pick and mix, and I do think there's an element of pick and mix in terms of delivery to clients, that people pick certain aspects or certain tools that they want to use for technological presentation to clients, and they mix them up, and they tend to look at them in isolation and not look at them in how can we pull all this together into one streamlined solution which adds efficiency to our business and actually enhances the client experience. So I think it's pretty diverse. I think it's pretty pick and mix. Unless you do it yourself and have the pockets to do it yourself, I think it's very hard to do. And the big challenge is, how do you get all these systems to talk to each other?
Yeah, understood. And in terms of a general broader view of where wealth managers are in delivering financial planning to clients, I think, for client stickiness, for client engagement, for developing a broader proposition, for maybe being less sales oriented than maybe the industry was in the past, I think my perspective is that financial planning has become more important to more firms than it was previously. So you're not necessarily a financial planner. You can be a wealth management firm that might be investment management related and do financial planning now. Is that broadly the view that you see, that the market is evolving to have a more financial planning hat on?
I guess there's some regulatory drivers that sit behind that as well. I mean, I think MiFID II, with the highlight on cost, there are a number of wealth managers in the market who just did investment management, and basically their mantra was, I'm cheaper than the competition, or I've got a better performance than the opposition. And they're pretty binary decisions for a client. They either are or you aren't. And I can tell you for a fact that one day you will be and one day you won't be. Therefore, it's a risk to your client. So the key to retaining clients and retaining income and retaining a good growing business is around relationship, and selling relationship is the key point, I think, moving forward for businesses that want to survive. If you want to be transactional, I think there will be a place for those businesses, but I think the number of those places is reducing significantly.
Great, thank you. James, what would you say to that? And obviously you would engage with, as you mentioned, different types of firms, large to small, international to domestic. This moving from transactional to relationship based, and maybe financial planning being key to that or central to that. Would you agree? Is that a theme you see?
It depends entirely on the firm type, I think, as Ian was really saying. So financial planning usage and penetration of specifically of the software is much higher in the large firms, we find, as you get to the long tail of IFAs we have in this country. So firms with lower than or fewer than five people in them, you tend to see much lower usage of the software in particular. And that's probably less than 50% actually at those very small firms. It tends to still be spreadsheet based, financial planning led, but with spreadsheet usage. And I think one of the points that was made by Ian again about regulatory focus, we saw the FCA focus on defined benefit transfers, and it was specifically called out in that paper, the use of tools in financial planning. And I think that in those smaller firms in particular, the use of spreadsheets and across the size will be a continued focus.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to ask Jamie, so the use of Excel, I know we hear it all the time in terms of wealth management and other firms in terms of their technical infrastructure. Do you see Excel in the market when you're approaching firms to talk about technology? Is Excel sort of the dominant system, or does it depend again on the firm type?
I mean, it does depend, but I think in general firms are a lot more reliant on Excel than they would like. Certainly, it's still an important part of the process of firm that they're looking to move away from it. And I mean, this goes beyond cash flow planning, that element. It's across the whole end-to-end process, and that's what we're seeing. There are a lot of good solutions for planning, and before that for onboarding, after it for the portfolio construction and personalization. But a big issue is that they're just not integrating well. There's not this seamless experience that the customer and the advisor want now, and there is a lot of, I'm sure we'll talk more about data and how that can impact AI and the likes later, but there's a lot of data trapped in spreadsheets, trapped in legacy systems. So it's just making that seamless experience that people are looking for a lot harder to achieve. And I think part of that, and maybe the use of Excel, but just in general, the way that all of this information is quite siloed is historically part of what firms' mindsets have been. When we've spoken to clients, we've often heard things like the focus for this year is improving onboarding, or the next project is going to be we're going to implement a cash flow planner, but it's still very siloed projects, which means there's inefficiency down the line as we're finding more and more critical needs to have this sort of seamless integrated approach. I think there's still quite a long way to go on that.
Just quickly, James, again, talking to a lot of the firms, as you will do in the market, what's your view on the status of financial planning? Is it an area that they're focused more on? Are they investing in it? Is it central to their modern proposition?
Yeah, it's certainly one of the hot topics that I think from a consultancy perspective, topics come in waves and flows. This is one of the hot topics at the moment. The drivers that we're seeing, the move to focus on client outcomes, and I think the standardization and delivery of robust advice is pretty key, and that's why we're seeing a focus on this. I think from a client engagement perspective, again, as Ian mentioned, this is becoming incredibly valuable. It gives you a real reason to be communicating with your clients, and the visualization of the value you're adding to them has become pretty critical as well. And then finally, again, that regulatory component, a lot of attention on that, and especially at the bigger firms, how do you standardize the service and advice that all your customers and clients are getting?
Ian, from a practitioner's perspective, are you finding the financial planning landscape more competitive now? So new players coming in that perhaps weren't there before?
I guess. I mean, I think we're still in an undercapacity perspective from a planner. I mean, I don't see. You very rarely get into competition with it when you go and meet a new client. There are so many opportunities out there, and you've got to remember at the current moment we're probably in the golden period for financial planning in terms of client acquisition or new client acquisition. In as much that you've got the baby boomer generation retiring with probably many with good pensions, and also have had the advantage of house price inflation over a number of years, and they're also inheriting from their through their families. And as such, I mean, I actually think there's an under resource in the market, and we certainly have no issue in finding new clients and winning new clients, and you rarely get into competition with someone, to be fair.
Yeah,
very rare. I think it's quite an interesting place to be at the moment.
So is that not driving firms to enter the market, or is the sort of
certainly driving consolidators to bring together and drive efficiencies through businesses and create value? I think that's happening.
Yeah.
I think for someone wanting to enter the market, if you're a one-man, two-man band who wanted to enter the market, the regulatory requirements, the PI cover, all those issues do make it difficult. Mm-hmm. And the capital required to run a business in this market and the onus that the regulator puts on you is increasing, and therefore I think the consolidator model is a way of mitigating some of that issue and driving that. Whereas brand new firms coming into the market, I think most people would think twice about doing it at the moment because of the risk. We're in a bit of a dichotomy. I think those that are good are going to get bigger. Those that consolidate are going to get bigger. I think new entrants are probably few and far between.
Yeah.
And again, James' point earlier about the number of small IFAs in the country. The majority of deliverers of this service are 1- and 2-man bands in this country, and they are under a lot of pressure. They don't have the technology resource. They don't have the ability to scale up. They don't. In many respects, they were good salesmen with some good relationships. And a lot of those are also getting to an age where they want to retire. So I think we're in a state of flux at the moment in terms of how, and all I can see is more consolidation, good firms getting bigger organisations, because that's who the regulator wants to deal with.
Yeah, understood.
I completely agree with everything Ian's just said around, 2020 was a big year for M&A, seeing Q1 in 21 being probably even larger than what we were seeing in 2020, and it looks like it will continue for the year. And it is those smaller firms who might be considering retirement or are looking for the tools and the risk and reg side that the large firms can offer them as being a key driver behind that. And it is, once those small firms, it does take a bit of time for them to be bedded in and get used to the rigor and sort of oversight of the firm itself, but it's the adoption of tools and methodology once they join those firms that's really driving a lot of uptake.
And despite perhaps there being a pressure in the market in terms of the skills available, James, are you seeing maybe some of the bigger firms actually trying to build new financial planning propositions, whether it be through acquisition or through organic strategic planning?
Yeah, and that is probably going to be, again, we saw it last year, but it'll be large again this year, which is all those firms, the big universal banks that ran away from this or pulled back from this post-financial, the last financial crisis and RDR. Those big universal banks are now looking at this again. I think there's a big drive for the hybrid advice model, and I think we had a small bet amongst us who would be the first person to mention COVID, so I'm about to lose that bet, so I apologise. But if anything, that's demonstrated that financial planners can work very effectively from home, which sort of gives weight to the hybrid advice model. But to deliver that hybrid advice model, especially at the scale a universal bank requires, needs the decent financial planning tools to be able to be shared with the client over screens like we're doing now. But also, to the second part of your question, Sue, I think it's, they're having to do an awful lot of recruitment and training of paraplanners and financial planners to get them through the machine to the scale they need. And we'll see how that pans out in 2021, because that is a very, very difficult thing to do, to recruit and train at those numbers they're looking at.
Yep. Okay, interesting. Jamie, we'll come on to the technology side in more detail later, but as we're talking about sort of market status and drivers, we all know tech has a big role to play here across the wealth management organization in general, financial planning included. When you look across the market, you're a player in this space. What is the status of the technological toolkit available for financial planners or around the financial planning skill sets?
I think we, as you know, so we did a lot of market research on this before launching our own planning tools last year, and we did see that there were some very good tools out there, and there's probably some connection to what Ian was saying about the different approaches or the different tools that firms can take or do take based on their size. But we see a lot of the planning solutions would veer either towards being too simplistic, particularly as we're starting to move now towards requirements for this more whole of wealth experience. So that these tools are just a little bit too basic, or they would go completely the other way and just be very, very complex, very powerful, but which would make adoption across the whole advisor team more difficult, and training would be quite onerous as well. And then coming back to the integration issue, we would see that when these new tools were taken on and were very valuable in isolation, it was not so easy to integrate them into existing advice processes with that right balance of usability, this powerful engine to handle the whole of wealth experience, and of course always be compliant at the same time. We'd even see cases where firms were using different tools. This would tend to be the larger firms with different tools at different elements of the planning process. So there might be a sort of a light touch customer-led tool on the website that some information could be entered into, and then different tool or different methodology used during the actual cash flow process once the advice had started. So there was inconsistency in the results between the two, which was far from ideal. So good tools out there, but a way to go to integrate them better and to utilize all of the data that's within them. That's probably something I'll keep coming back to about the data that firms have or could have. It's sitting in all around the organizations, but it's not being leveraged in the way that it needs to be.
Yeah, makes sense. Ian, sorry, James.
I was just going to say on that point, Jamie, we when we spoke to those 38 financial planners to look at the tools they use, we did see quite a few of them using multiple different tools. And actually, this will really annoy you, Jamie, but one of the things we do see most in this market is it's probably the area which advisors share licenses the most. So we found that in, say, an office of 5 people, there'll be one financial planning license, and they'll all go across to that PC and use it for the financial planning, then go back to their day-to-day workstation. Now, that might have changed because of where we've all been for the last 9 months, but multiple tools and also multiple advisors sharing the same one license.
Okay, so yeah, strategically suboptimal, however a technologist might describe it. Ian, what's your view from a practitioner's perspective? So, I think you're a proponent of technology from previous conversations. what's the view from Mazars? What does your technological infrastructure, as much as you're allowed to tell us, look like? Is it fragmented? Is what James just said true for you as well, or do you see that in the market?
I think it's entirely true what you've said. So I'm not gonna hide and pretend it isn't. And I think I said technology has to be the great enabler in this space, and it's not going to get away from the ability of developing personal relationships, but it enables personal relationships. And Jamie's point about data is key. I am absolutely sure we are sitting on data that if we analysed and used correctly, it would add significant value to our clients. It would also add significant value to our business. And I think that there is a golden nugget here somewhere around finding an optimal technology solution that delivers at every aspect of our business. And other than actually building it yourself, a provider that can come in and provide that for you, I think is in a really strong position. And as such, we've spoken. Our biggest challenge is how do we get these various discrete pieces of kit to talk to each other. We're working towards enter one piece of data once, only ever enter it once, and it feeds into all the systems. But that is so hard to do. And whilst there are consultants out there who say they can help you do it, there's always you're always up against the firewall in that system, against the firewall in that system, against we're protecting our IP over here. We don't want you messing around with this. So the only solution is actually to create a one size fit, one set bit of kit that allows you to deliver what you want to deliver as a firm. Yeah. Fortunately, there are going to be very few firms out there who have the pockets deep enough to go and develop that. And the development of that is, we ran a technology platform at very early stages for employee benefits. We were spending a fortune on the development of it and not making any money on the client side of it. So, at the end of the day, businesses have to survive. So there's got to be a coming together of the two to get to the right place.
Yeah. And that drives the M&A discussion you raised earlier. And it doesn't cost twice as much to run twice as much AUM.
Correct.
So back to why we're seeing all the M&A.
Yeah. And Ian, just thinking about the rationale. So, what is the sort of firm's view as to why you need to do this? So, yes, it's inefficient. Yes, it's maybe painful to work with. Yes, you maybe don't get the best client outcomes. But have you put together sort of a data set, a KPI set that says, look, if we have this single infrastructure, we will deliver X, Y, and Z? Can you tell us anything more about that?
We're actually in the process of transforming our business as we speak now, and we're in the. Interestingly, a big part of that just got launched today, and one of our goals is how do we future-proof this business for the next 10 years? Because I think in the next 10 years we are going to see significant change in the delivery of services and how we do that, and how businesses actually deliver those services. Gone are the days of I'm going to second person to mention it. Sorry, COVID-19 has seen the light in that actually you don't have to go and see clients face to face. We can win work without actually seeing clients face to face. And consumer behaviour has changed also. It's not just us changing. Consumers expect to be able to be dealt with like this. Consumer behaviour has changed in the way that they want to receive information and how they engage with you. So all of that is changing. That I talked about the baby boomer bulge. I mean, that's going to in the next 10 years, that's going to dissipate, and we've got a new set of consumers with different values and different ways in which they want to engage with people. So unless you change the way you run your business and engage with your clients, you're not going to be here in 10 years' time. So for us, it's really about surviving and coming through the other side. And I think we want to be as much a first mover as we possibly can in this space to take as much advantage out of it.
Yeah. So
there's one thing I'll add. I feel empowered now to mention COVID, as I'll only be the third person. But something else we've seen is, the big challenge already was the difficulty firms had to adapt at the necessary speed to the evolving client expectations and demands. But the last year has shown us that tech adoption across a much wider spread of generations has started to occur in terms of it. Look at my parents 18 months ago. All of their shopping, they'd have gone down to Sainsbury's once a week, and if they did ever want to speak to me, they'd pick up the phone. Now it's online. They'll use Amazon, they'll use Tesco online. They suggested on Christmas Day we had a Zoom call. They're in their 80s. It was a disaster, but the fact is, even a year ago they wouldn't have had a clue about this, and they're at the end of the age spectrum. But I think it's fair to say that things aren't going to go back to the way they were. People are a lot more comfortable with video chat, with messaging, and a much wider spread of generations. And I think it's quite clear we're not going to go back to the old ways. So people need to adapt to that.
Agree with that, and I think this is a question, I suppose, sorry, Stephen, I'm going to ask a question for Ian first, and then you, Jamie. If we're all doing a lot of these things ourselves, would you ever let the client or your clients, Ian, effectively do some of it and play with the financial planning models themselves? Would you ever let them? Yeah, you do.
We do. So we have a portal,
yeah,
and it allows them to update their information. So we have a two-way relationship through a secure portal. Yeah.
And
why wouldn't you?
Well, what's the sort of reaction to that? And the reason I ask is we see two really different opinions on this, which is as soon as we let the clients do what they want and look at it themselves, we lose that relationship directly with the financial planner or advisor. And then we see people like yourselves who are, the more we let them think about things in their own time behind the scenes, the more valuable that is. So have you seen a sort of good uptake of that and good feedback? Or
Let's start at the top. First and foremost, the majority of your clients won't want to bother with it.
Yeah.
So, it's not a big issue. There will always be a small number who have a much greater interest and would like to play with the tool to see what it looks like.
Yeah.
Of that number, over 50% will do it once and then never do it again because they can't be bothered. There'll be a smaller number who want to do it, and actually doesn't that create a much more engaging relationship that they actually understand it and can have a much more in-depth conversation with you. So why wouldn't you let them?
No,
if you don't let them do it, someone else will.
And I think it is very much the client personality type and catering to that. So conscious of the company I work for, lots of accountants really love to drive into that detail, look at every outcome, understand exactly what's in the box and how it works. Whereas, some of my family members close to home have absolutely zero interest or understanding of what's in the box. Correct. And would rather that someone.
And actually, so I work for a firm of accountants as well, but you have. But they're only interested in one part of the detail. They're not interested in the whole thing. They're interested in this little bit over here, which is of interest to them because it's a spreadsheet. And in this particular instance, and I, let them play with it. Let them play with it. Why not? And as long as you can ring fence it, so it sits outside. This is our advice. This is what you've done, and you can securely separate that out, which you can. Technology allows you to do that. Then it's not. Why is that an issue? Because what it does is it creates a discussion, which might create more business.
And I think this is probably the area we see our clients, the firms we work with, having the most debate. How far should they extend it to the clients, and what should clients be allowed to do?
Yeah. I think the other thing, you Stephen, you talked earlier about the need for training, or I think maybe James actually, the requirement for there is a massive. I said that we've got a capacity issue, and we do need to train up people. But we're not going to train people in the same way we trained them 10 years ago, 15 years ago. We're going to need different skill sets in this space, and we need to start working out what those skill sets are. Presenting on a across a Zoom and how to share screens, and it's completely different to sitting in front of someone face to face. You almost need to do a bit of TV training in some respects about presentation skills, but it's a different sort of presentation, so that's just one aspect of it. And if we go to data analytics, I am sure we are going to be recruiting data analysts in our business. We will be. Why? That has to come. That because that will add us so much value. It'll give us an edge that others firms that won't have.
And I think we all probably Jamie spoke about the data piece. I think the other side to this, we're seeing a lot of time and effort being spent in this space in particular, is the quality of the visualization and the user experience and the user, effectively what you're showing, because you might have that client who wants to see the detailed spreadsheet, but for the majority of clients, and when we speak to the financial planners directly, they want something that is presentable and easy to understand, and frankly, attractive and user friendly rather than.
I think that's really apt. And one of the things that we've introduced as part of our change in our proposition is we call it the shortened report. So in the good old days, a client got 55 pages of text about what the advice was, which was basically an arse covering for us, not giving advice to the client. And we changed that around, and each client on each piece of advice now gets a 4-page document, which is modern, looks modern, lots of graphics, has all the risk warnings, all the risks in there, but it's supported by a document. If the client wants to see the supporting document, you can have it, but this is what you get. And we had an ex-director of Brown Shipley, who's become a client of ours, say, "Thank God, I actually understand what you're actually telling me to do for the first time. It's a pleasure," And this was about changing. You've got to change the way we present things. We've got to get into the 21st century.
Yeah. If I could touch on that as well, so from the perspective of customer involvement or playing around with the tools, I think it's another consequence, if that's the right word, of customers expecting more of the hyper-personalized Netflix, Amazon type experience with not only more, I guess, easy access, but they're wanting to get more involved. They're going to want some self-service. I think it's gradual, but there's a better understanding of fees, better understanding of the impact of fees, and the impact, or the better understanding of value, which needs to translate into the service that they're getting, and whether that's just being able to have access to a robust client portal, or goes further, some active involvement in picking themes or instruments for a portfolio. We're starting to see customers wanting to be that bit more hands-on. It's got to be in a controlled manner, obviously, but we're seeing that, and conversely, and with clients being more aware of what's out there, they're also more willing and able to move providers if they need to, if they don't think they're getting the best service. Certainly not seeing that cheapest is best. People will pay a premium for a good service and good product, but I think I'm sure the others on the panel will agree there seems to be a lot less loyalty these days. People won't stick around if fees and services is not great. They'll be more willing to compare the market, as they were, which is another consequence of being or having these expectations that they would have, that they would get from the Netflix, from the Amazon, from YouTube, and so on.
Actually, touching on that, Jamie, and what Ian mentioned earlier, so it's about enhancing the client relationship. So some level of self-service will further engage specific groups of client. Not everyone, because some don't want to touch it, but you also mentioned that if you didn't do it, someone else would. And Jamie just mentioned the clients are maybe less sticky and less loyal. So do you see technology in this area as a means of client acquisition, as opposed to, maybe you were talking earlier about existing clients and deepening relationships with them, but is it also about client acquisition? Have you seen that yet? So Ian, sorry.
Yeah, we're using. I mean, we've had the best start to a year we have ever. Our year runs 1st of September. We're 25% up on the same period last year in a COVID period. Why? Because we've engaged with technology in client acquisition. And if you, how else were you going to meet people if you didn't engage with technology in this space? And that's a sea change. And we're about to launch a whole new campaign in the next month on it. But it's that thinking has accelerated through our business like wildfire. And I think there's a change in consumer behaviour in that particular respect as well. And I think the firms, the old, running seminars, the cost of running a seminar, the food, the drink, organising a room. We were doing this for user groups historically. We've now switched to webinars. We were getting 50 people to a seminar with a load of entertaining tacked on the side of it. We're getting 300 to a webinar, which is recorded, which they then share, and then they come back to us. It's so much simpler. It goes back to the Netflix, Amazon approach, that actually I can't see this now, but I can see it in an hour's time, and people log on to it then. They get the option to choose when to view it. So unless you're providing services which give them that option to choose when to view, you're going to fall behind, because that's how people are consuming information at the moment, aren't they? Or increasingly consuming information.
I said we'd ask questions at the end, but something has just come in which might be useful just to plug in now rather than come back to later. And it is, in a similar vein to working from home, is flexibility the key to the offering? So if the client wants to self-service for basic admin, they can, but if they want a face meeting, it can be arranged. So maybe a bit of a hybrid approach, but it comes back to, I suppose, the fee model and how that works. So Ian, you offer them some flexibility, but how does that impact the fee model? And overall, can you segment your I suppose, your offering based on what a client wants and give them that flexibility, maybe like a menu of services? How flexible can you be?
Be as flexible as you want to be, but you need to make sure legally you have controlled what you're responsible for and what the client is responsible for, and you price those bits accordingly. If a client wants to submit, I don't know, let's say as part of a total wealth management process, the client wants to submit their tax returns themselves. Well, we're not going to charge for that, and but we will charge them for providing the information to go into it. So you and access to that. So you've got to think through what are the consequences of each part of that, and where are we liable. So what you can't be is liable for something that they have done. So you need to have an engagement which allows you to do that. Now, I think a lot of wealth management firms commoditize a lot of their services because that's the way to create efficiencies, and a lot of those services will be commoditized. But there is the space for bespoking, but they need to be priced accordingly, and we need to be sure that we get value out of that. But it's perfectly possible to do. You just got to get your head around what you're responsible for, what they're responsible for, and it's priced accordingly, and ensure we get value out of it.
Yep.
I think specifically on that, actually, one of the things we've seen over the last year or so, but at the high net worth end specifically, and the ultra high net worth, is the return of advisory. So there's this big push, especially on the Swiss bank side, to put everyone into the same kind of DFM type structures. We've seen advisory and how you can actually have a profitable advisory business without a ridiculous amount of risk control and oversight from sending your client 22-page document every time they want to trade in one equity based on an advisory relationship. We've actually seen a bit of a comeback of advisory over the last 6 to 9 months. It'll be interesting to see whether that continues, but that is about the bespoking of the relationship and charging effectively for it and effectively making money. So I think you might still see those high net worth clients who have discretionary portfolios at the core, but with satellite portfolios now being introduced where they're allowed to have strong opinions on advisory. Yep. And firms have worked out effectively over the last 6 to 9 months to how to make those advisory services profitable again, but also have the risk and control without it huge amounts of ridiculous burden on the client.
Yeah, I think specifically in Switzerland, there was Credit Suisse Invest, UBS Advice, Julius Baer, and then Jamie will probably know the Vontable story. This kind of hybrid advisory model mix between discretionary and advisory. The critical point is it was all built on heavy investment in technology to enable it, right? So it wasn't a purely human service. Jamie, what's the sort of technological environment for giving this sort of flexible service? Ian's talked about tools at the front end to engage clients and to self-service. From a modular service perspective, I'm sure you have a view on how technologically possible that is? I mean, presumably the framework exists.
Absolutely, yes, yeah, and I think this it kind of comes back to one of my opening comments about how firms had traditionally treated these things as quite siloed. So as their mindset moves towards making solutions a lot more connect a lot better, and move towards I guess a more collaborative mindset, and will work with best in breed partners rather than just taking what their incumbent could provide. The onus is then on us as the vendors to make sure that we're collaborating well, both philosophically we work well with each other, but also it's API first, that data can connect very well. I'm going to come back to data yet again, so I think that's still the key to making all these different parts work. So I think that a big challenge we've seen, there can be all of these great tools, and a lot of information can be collected via onboarding. There'll be information sat in CRM, through planning. Obviously, a lot of information will be collected. There's huge amounts of data, and then when it's translated, or if it is, still the customer is okay. You're conservative. You're going into portfolio 2. Despite all we know about you, you're the same as 1 in 5 of our customers. So we're starting to see now that firms are changing their mindsets, vendors are changing their mindsets to be able to allow, I guess, customers or advisors to dissect the service better, but and whoever's driving it, whether it's the customer or the advisor, the data will still flow and can be used upstream or downstream in the most efficient way.
Okay. I think data's been raised several times, so rather than stick to my sort of challenges, opportunities, status, structure, let's just go on to data. So let's take the view that it's the core. Ian mentioned at the beginning they probably sit on lots of data, and it's about bringing that data to the fore that's going to really modernize and future-proof the business, or a significant part of it, hiring data analysts. So probably Jamie and James, as you speak to a broad range of firms in the market, tell us about data. What, it's the fundamental. How do firms get their data infrastructure in place? What do they need to do?
I'll let Jamie go first on that one, and I'll chip in because it's Jamie's pet topic.
Yes, yeah, it is. Well, I think there's going to, ironically, need to be headcounting to help make sense of it in the first place. I dare say, James's firm would be able to help with that sort of thing, because it's a huge undertaking, but I think with massive rewards for doing it. We know, or we're seeing with our clients, there's a lot of information they have. There's maybe infinitely more that is or should be available to them. It's just it's either siloed, it's not being utilized well, it needs to be collected better, it needs to be normalized better, and then when it's all stored in a centralized place, used in the right way. And obviously AI is, without this data, AI, everyone will continue to talk about it and it will be a buzzword, but there won't be much going on with it. I think once we've got all the data, and we'll start to see much better products, services, those will improve. Advisors and customers are definitely going to benefit. Maybe I'll come on to AI more in a bit, but James, if you were to answer, you're probably closer to how, or the best ways to leverage that data so that it can be used.
I think it's got easier in the last couple of years. I definitely feel that my life has got easier when I think to the projects I was doing 15 years ago or 10 years ago with those sort of behemoth data migrations. Now it does seem a lot easier, with not necessarily even disrupting some of the places that data is stored, but just being able to plug into them more easily and combine it elsewhere. So I think it has got easier, but it's still very difficult. And actually a great example in the financial planning space is we still see a lot of tools where you're doing the financial plan in your financial planning tool. The user turns to their tax calculator, does the tax calculation, turns back to the financial planning tool and brings in the IHT calculations or whatever it might be. So even in a sort of niche technology component of what we all do in the industry, you still got two things there where the user's going between two different systems in what is one part of functionality. So yeah, it's all spread around, but it's easier to combine than it used to be. You mentioned AI. I'm not actually going to talk about that because I don't think we're there yet with what we're doing in this space. But I do think things like open banking for financial planning will become really interesting when, and the UK isn't really as far ahead as some other countries where you can bring in investment assets very easily to that relationship. So as a financial planner, I can bring in an automated manner the whole relationship view of off-platform assets at other banks, and then non-investment assets. So I can really do a full life plan as to everything that individual or that family group has from a multi-goal, multi-family situation and family individual situation, and that is really complex. That is where we are gradually going.
Interesting. Ian, what are you seeing in terms of the open banking in relation to financial planning and access to the broader view? What's the status as a practitioner in terms of access to those
We're just trialing open banking. Actually, we've got a trial going on as we speak now with 10 clients. The 5 have already signed up in the last week, in the last month, and that's quite interesting because it goes to what James was saying in terms of being able to then upload that into the cash flow tool, and it regularly updates, and it gives them a much better view of expenditure. And I think we have to do it. I don't think we should do it. I think
Ian, just quickly on that, that's one of the areas we've probably seen the most value in, that the difference between where a client thinks their expenditure is going and where it actually is going when it is laid out for them.
Well, I can, you do cash flow models and they tell you their expenditure, and you say, well, what do you do with that 50,000 a year that you don't spend? And they go, I don't have 50,000 a year, I don't spend. Well, according to this, you do. Where is it? Oh yeah, and because people forget discretionary spend. Buying a coffee, going to the pub, whatever, the cinema, whatever. Going back to the point about data, though, I think it's easy to talk about the right systems and the ability of the systems to operate. The challenge is having the right culture in your business that data is important. And I think that's a key driver, because you can have all the best systems in the world, but if there's no culture of we only operate with data in the right way, it won't work. And I think, that is absolutely key. My comment.
And on that, we see, when I'm going through, absolutely agree with that statement as well. It's not unusual for me to come across a lot of key dates entered into systems which are still the 1st of January 1900, because that's easy for someone at the very front of the form filling or the data entry to do, but it really does stuff things up later down the line.
And in order to get that, you've got to have a bottom up and a top down approach on it. So you've got to have a zero tolerance view on it. You've got to have support and training to get people in the right place. But you've got to bring the two together so that you get good data, it makes it easier. And actually, we're going through this now. This is what we're doing at the moment. And we are seeing wins all the way down the road. Every time, and what we do is celebrate the wins, so we get people to talk to the team about, we did this and this is what happened. So instead of it taking us 5 hours, it took us half an hour. Why wouldn't we do more of it? There's a reason for doing it. And there is that you are walking through mud a lot of the time to get to where you need to get to, but actually when you get to the end of it, you are running on a Tartan athletics track. So that's where we need to get to.
And that comes back to the UX and UI point earlier, that if it's easy to do, people do it.
Yeah. I think your point about total wealth management, certainly I went over to America last year to talk to some sort of sister firms we have with the accountancy side who have IFA businesses, and they certainly work on a total wealth model. They collect all the assets, and it's where we're taking our proposition, because actually we do give advice on all those assets. So we need to be recompensed for doing that, and the client needs to understand we give value there. So I think that this is where this is all going.
Yeah, and again, we would look at people like Merrill Lynch in the US, who have been phenomenally successful for the last decade, really, at that whole wealth view, using their financial plan as the cornerstone to their relationships, and using it to increase their share of wallet by saying, oh, you have got that extra 500K we didn't happen to know about. Well, wouldn't it be great if it was with Merrill Lynch?
Yeah. I think one of the stories, in addition to the fact that Merrill Lynch has spent a massive amount of money on some of the tech tools, is the availability of data. So, the US has better availability of data historically than we do here. They're more of a localized economy. It's US dollar, it's local stocks. Jamie, what's your view as a technology vendor that probably has to wrap in a lot of data sources? How well prepared is the market to give a total wealth view?
The collection and normalization of the data has come on leaps and bounds. I think it's whether the firms are in a position to utilize that. I think this is where the whole of wealth that we're going to be moving to, total wealth, that firms are going to have to start offering. I think this will be a good test, because we'll I think quickly see whether firms look for the quick wins to incorporate this and to be able to monetize it and offer more products, or will they do it in maybe a slower and steady way to ensure that the data flows in between all of these, so it can be the seamless end-to-end process. We were talking to one client who was looking at doing this, but we encouraged them to take a step back, because they have a traditional advice process, and they worked out that from end to end, if the advisor was sitting down and tried to do the from handshake to portfolio recommendation report presentation, they would need, I think, somewhere between 15 and 20 tabs open. Certainly with Excel as one of them, they would be doing costs and charges, calculations on a client-by-client basis in Excel, where so compliance were pulling their hair out about that. But the data was still being siloed, wasn't transferring very well. So I think a lot of firms have some or an eye on opportunity, but they have to be able to assess the risk as well, and where data sits and how data transfers is going to be a key problem. So I think they maybe need to take a step back and make sure this flow is better before heading leaps and bounds into offering new solutions, and then down the line facing the same problems all over again, that the data isn't usable across the whole business.
Okay. As is often the case with technology, the tech is only as good as the user. So, Ian, coming back to the sort of cultural point earlier, any lessons or educational points you can provide about how you get your users behaving in the right way, doing the right things, being sort of having a cultural view around the quality of data? I mean, top down, are we talking, from the leadership instilling that culture, or what else is contributing to that?
Well, you have to. You can't say one thing and do another. So you need to lead from the front. So that's key. You have to have an adherence, a strategy built around adherence to it. That actually, if it ain't right, and at various levels, you have to build that into people's appraisals and objectives, and you have to support them and train them and provide support in a number of different ways. And I think. You have to have both ends working together to get to the right result. Because I've seen too many times where a fantastic bit of kit is put into a business, which has been sold to you by someone like Jamie, who's come in and flogged us a great bit of kit because he's charmed us into doing it, and we use 1% of it, or 2% of it, or 3% of it, and we're sitting on all this kit that actually we're not optimizing. And I think for a lot of firms, the starting point is, what are you actually using this for? Are you optimizing it? What can it actually do for you? Because it might be you don't need to change your technology. You just need to use what you've got properly. And there will be massive advantages to a lot of businesses in just doing that. And I think, there has to be a will at the top to make that work as well. You can't, and you cannot, it's almost like you have zero tolerance on it. If it ain't there, we're gonna come after you. And if you always remember, what gets measured gets done. And data is about getting measured. So measure it, because if it ain't right, and people are always keen to tell you it's wrong. The data's wrong. Yeah, well, the data's wrong because you didn't put the right thing in the first place. So go and put the right thing in, and we'll get the data right. You need to call people out on that sometimes.
Yeah. James, you obviously have a view across a number of players in the market. Are they taking this kind of cultural data first approach? Is it top of the agenda? Is it being led from the front?
I think everything Ian said is absolutely what we experience, and use of systems they tend to have some very good technology in a lot of these businesses, but a lot of it's not being used, or a small percentage of it's being used, and I think there's a great opportunity to use it more. I think different firms have different abilities to influence the use of technology. If you're a universal bank, you can pretty much tell your staff to use it, and they have to use it. If you're a more self-driven, independent network of IFAs, it's difficult to get people to change how they've done things previously. So the type of firm has a big impact on that. And then, frankly, the users themselves. So it is very, very difficult to change someone, to get someone who's towards the end of their career and is in a very comfortable position with the way that they've successfully run a fantastic business for 20 plus years, to suddenly change the way they are doing things, frankly, and why would they if they've got a year left of doing what they need to do? What we do see there is injecting, as part of the practice transition plan, putting younger team members in, obviously in a sort of transition plan there, and you do see adoption. But everything Ian said is absolutely spot on. It's not just wealth management, professional services firms, everyone's struggling, lawyers, accountants, all struggle with the same thing. How do you get relatively independent professionals to use these tools? And I think everything Ian said is absolutely spot on. I would probably add that we do try and gamify it a bit. We find that these individuals are hyper competitive, and if they see that one of their colleagues is doing slightly better in a number of things completed and ranked, they tend to up the game.
Yeah, league tables work very well, don't they?
Yeah, they are. I think it's the same for us. In our business, we're all hyper competitive individuals, and seeing how your colleagues doing is always a bit of a help to motivate oneself. On your data point, yes, clearly, and you just need to look at where these firms are hiring. You can see how seriously it's being taken by the demand in our industry for people to understand and know data.
If I can just make a quick point following from what James said about users. When we talk about UX, obviously most of the focus tends to be around the UX for the customer, but what we're seeing more and more opportunities to improve the advisor experience and listen to the advisors too. And if you solve a lot of these problems, it's going to positively impact the customer and the firm as well. So time and again, we're seeing advisors frustrated by the inefficiencies, the number of systems they use, the time spent manually entering data, how little time can actually be spent on doing what they want to be doing, value-added advice. So by sort of listening to what they want to achieve, automating all of their manual processes and giving them, I guess, greater ability to provide the more personalized advice that the customers want, and maybe even more personalized products, the benefits for the customers are pretty obvious, and the firm becomes more efficient as well. So yeah, we always try. I don't know if we could ever call the advisors the decision makers, but we always try to hear their voice in it as well, because you typically uncover a lot of inefficiencies that can be improved. Great.
Well, gentlemen, we are coming up to the hour, so as I said, time always flies by during these discussions, and we've bounced around a little bit, but we've had, I think, a good session. To me, it's clear that financial planning has a core role to play in the proposition of wealth management, helping increase stickiness with clients, engaging the next generation. It's going to be central to the proposition. There's issues with data, there's issues with culture, there's issues with getting the most out of technology and bringing on board a new generation of talent to use those systems. Very quickly, can you each give me a sort of 30-second summary of where you maybe think financial planning can get the biggest bang for its buck from its approach to technology? Now, Ian, I don't know whether you can summarize quick wins. Putting you on the spot.
Get your data right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. Very simple. James.
For me, the most exciting thing will be when we take what is a advisor-led and advisor-driven activity and business, and we're able to cost-effectively provide that service, and it will be probably largely automated or entirely automated to every single person in the UK. Big goals. So this is PwC projects for the next 2 to 3 years. I think we should all aim for that, Stephen. I think just because you've got less assets, less cash, It doesn't mean, in fact, quite frankly, those individuals need it sometimes more than the people who have access to an awful lot of professional advisors.
Yeah, perfect. And Jamie, final point to you.
So yeah, just firms should be using the best tools for multiple providers, multiple sources if needed, to be able to provide this whole of wealth, total wealth planning. Got to be fully integrated. As Ian says, data is key. Making sure data is flowing efficiently across the whole organisation, and then utilise well to create better outcomes for our customers.
Great. Well, thank you to each of you for participating. Much appreciated. So it sounds like the next webinar should be on data for financial planning. So we'll do a version 2 and focus exclusively on that. So thank you to you each for participating. Much appreciated. For those listening in, thank you for the time. We hope you enjoyed it. If you have any further questions, please feel free to send them through. We'll be doing another WealthTech Talks next week, and the week after, and the week after that. So please tune in. This session will be available recorded. So again, have a listen in if you wish to do so again. But gentlemen, thanks very much for the time, and we'll speak again soon.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.